this bike. That is, of course, unless you don't mind having your arms ripped out of their sockets, have experienced taming vicious wild animals, or don't mind permanently deforming your face with a massive grin. These are all very legitimate points depending on your experience level. This 2023 YZ450FX will either have you smiling ear to ear or begging for mercy on the side of a trail. Seriously, it may look beautiful, but it's far from ladylike, which, in my experience, usually indicates a good time ahead. Thank you to G-Force Powersports in Denver, Colorado for loaning me this bike as part of a promotional partnership. Check them out through the link in the description. More on that later. Okay, so now you're thinking, hell yeah, brother, I need me one of these things. I grew up wrestling wild gators in the swamp. I can handle it. Okay, tough guy, you've made your point. But hear me out. This thing is a beast. The response in brute power from idle all the way to wide open is a handful. It took me a solid 2 days to really get comfortable on this thing. I started out in Moab on the hard-packed, loose, and rocky terrain. Maybe not the best planning, but that's just how it went down. I found myself fighting for traction a lot. It spins the wheel in almost every gear with just the slightest suggestion of throttle. With that said, I certainly did figure out how to control it and lay down the traction after a while. Once I got the hang of it and was able to relax a little bit, I was surprised with how manageable it can actually be. Riding a gear high and really lugging it out of turns with a smooth and linear twist of the throttle makes this thing feel like it's a drift car. Perfectly predictable rear wheel slides in and out of turns. And the ability to effortlessly run third gear from about 15 miles per hour all the way through 50 miles per hour makes the riding experience very enjoyable. There is never a situation where you feel you don't have the power you want ready to go. I found myself focusing less on anticipating shifting and more just on riding the bike. Twist and go. Really simple. The engine, although incredibly responsive, is very linear and predictable. It only does what you tell it to. But it does exactly what you tell it to. There's no lag, no hesitation, and no forgiveness. People often complain about how four-strokes are horrible for low-speed riding because they flame out and stall often. I've certainly had this experience on many Euro 4-strokes, but this motor is phenomenal in terms of its ability to lug. Yes, it will stall much easier than a two-stroke, but for a 450, I'm very impressed with how low in the RPM you can comfortably ride it. I'll have a whole other video talking about its performance in very technical, hard enduro type terrain, so be sure to subscribe, you will not want to miss that one. Let's talk suspension. Day one, I felt like I was riding a bull. It was extremely harsh on rocks and small ledges. I turned out the compression all the way and it still felt super stiff. The rear end was deflecting left and right and the front was difficult to keep planted. After putting about 10 hours on the bike and playing with settings more, it seemed to break in and loosen up. I was able to turn the clickers back in and the bike became much more stable and plush feeling. My only point in saying this, and it should go for any new bike, is that you may need to give the suspension some time to properly break in. Now that it's been properly beat on, wow. I imagine the bike to maintain that harshness given the fact that it's designed to be ridden very fast, but it actually feels quite plush and good even in the more technical terrain. I'm 180 pounds, completely naked, and the bike still has the stock springs. I really have no complaints about the suspension at this point. It seems to be a great do-it-all setup, which is no surprise for any Yamaha KYB off-road bike. Now, where the bike really feels great is in some ultra-fast, soft terrain. Michigan was the perfect place to test. Whether or not you have interest in this 450FX, G-Force Powersports certainly has a bike for you. They're the largest family-owned dealership in Denver and have a huge inventory of Yamaha, KTM, Husqvarna, Suzuki, and Kawasaki motorcycles. It's really rad that their marketing manager and now friend of mine Josh is taking a unique approach and willing to work with creators on projects like this one. My buddy Zach, who's a badass rider and very knowledgeable, also works as a salesman there. He can help you get set up on a bike that suits your needs. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to stop in and say hello. Also, follow them on Instagram and drop a comment. Support a dealership that's putting effort into helping me create useful and exciting content to show all of you. Let them know who sent you when you stop by. I've never ridden a bike that was more stable and effortless to ride in this terrain. You just look where you want to go and the bike follows. It's incredible how much confidence the chassis inspires at high speed. Even if you pick a bad line, the bike just straightens itself out. It almost never felt sketchy or unpredictable. It does take a bit of effort to get the bike to turn in, but I was pleasantly surprised with how relatively nimble it feels. The stability in the high speed sections definitely make up for its weight in the tighter stuff. Yet, I really can't complain about it in those situations either. A rider with less developed balance would likely disagree, as they'll be fighting the bike's weight a bit more. So there's one big complaint I have about this bike. It absolutely feels like it was made for a horse jockey, meaning a rather short person. I'm 6 feet tall, and for the record, I love the feel of a small bike. The Yamaha two-strokes are pretty notorious for having this cramped cockpit compared to their Euro competitors. I always run a stock or shorter than stock bar setup, but this 450FX, even on the most forward bar position, just feels like laterally the bars are too close to the pegs. When I'm accelerating in a mildly relaxed position while standing, this puts my hands basically touching my hips. It feels like I can't ever quite get ahead of the bike and anticipate acceleration enough. In turn, this creates a bit of instability within my body, and I feel like I'm not as locked into the bike at times as I'd like to be. I don't have this feeling on my YZ250X or other bikes I've ridden. With that said, it surely wasn't enough of a problem to kill any enjoyment for me. Just took some adapting and getting used to. Now, would I recommend this bike to you? Well, I sure love it and would totally consider purchasing one at some point. It's one of the most fun bikes I've ever ridden. Just raw excitement the whole time. Shit, that was not the right clip. I may not be an expert rider in many aspects of the sport, but I feel pretty confident in saying I'm competent overall. A beginner or even intermediate rider, I think, is surely making a mistake by getting this bike. Could they ride it and have fun? Totally. But they could at the same time be doing themselves a huge disservice in battling a bike that's simply too much bark for them. If you put me on this bike 5 years ago, I would have gotten myself in so much trouble. It would have beat the life out of me trying to control it. I can't tell anyone what to do, and I certainly don't care what they do, but I would not recommend this to someone starting out. I'd say, generally speaking, it's never recommended for a beginner to start on a 450, but this bike in particular is known to be on the vicious end of things. The power on this thing is very serious. One whiskey throttle at the wrong time, and Elon may be giving you a call to ask some questions about space travel. It's just an unnecessary amount of power, even for me. Yet, I really am having fun with it. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned how I was impressed with how well you can lug it. This still holds true, but mind you, I have a lot of experience using a clutch to smooth things out riding technical terrain. Someone with less experience will likely not have an enjoyable time riding this bike slow, and they will most definitely be stalling it a lot and getting jerked around by the touchy throttle. When I say it's good, I mean it's usable for an experienced rider. I by no means intend to imply that it's effortless and forgiving like a two-stroke. It's simply not. For what it's made for, Yamaha did an excellent job with this bike overall. With the right pilot, it even performs surprisingly well in unintended terrain.
That works for me.
Literally first try.
I mean, hey, it's a good bike. What can I say?
Sheesh!
Wow.